everybody, and welcome back to the Ocarina of Time Deep Dives. In today's episode, we will be looking at Hyrule Field, Lon Lon Ranch, and Hyrule Castle within Ocarina of Time. We will be covering the adult and child timelines for all these areas, as well as any beta content we could find. Hyrule Field is a very large and boring, wide-open field. Sadly, I do not feel that Hyrule Field holds up as well as it did in 1998. In 1998, it was pretty revolutionary. It was a big, large open field. To my knowledge, there wasn't anything as vast or impressive as Hyrule Field. Nowadays, large open landscapes are pretty commonplace. Personally, I think Termina Field holds up much better. This is a very cohesive and tight field. This place is also rich in content, and there's a lot of fun to be had here. This isn't a Termina Field video, however. If you want to know more on Termina Field, check out the Termina Field deep dive I did a few months before this. There will be a link in the description. Now that I've taken several digs on Hyrule Field, what is there really? Well, Hyrule Field connects all the primary areas of Hyrule, acting like a hub. So this is an area you'll be traveling through a lot in the game, since you kind of have to go through here to get to really everything in the game at one point. The first thing we see in Hyrule Field is the title screen intro. I'll let this play out in full since it's a wonderful cutscene. Also, as we continue, I'm going to have a small map of Hyrule Field in the corner of this video. The purpose of this is for those who are unfamiliar with Hyrule Field can know exactly where we are. Before we fully delve deep into Hyrule Field, I want to talk about the music first to get it out of the way. This would have been the fourth Hyrule Field theme we've heard through these games so far, so I'd like to compare them to the other themes we've heard throughout the series. To start, let's start off with Zelda 1. This is a segment from the Zelda 1 theme. This is a segment from the Zelda 2 theme. This is a segment from the Link to the Past theme. And now finally, here is the Ocarina of Time theme. Each of these themes create a really good feeling for the game. I think the Ocarina of Time theme sets a really good mood, however. It's very adventurous. Also, did you know that the music will change depending on what you're doing? Yes, that is true. When you're fighting P-hats, for example, it will change and become more dramatic. Also, the theme is made up of 8 different segments that will play randomly. You may not have noticed it, but your brain did. This touch is just very interesting to me and shows the care and thought that went into the game. Now let's get into the meat and potatoes of this area in the game. To start with Hyrule Field, there isn't exactly a lot going on here. We first entered here from the exit of Kokiri Forest. I don't know why, but I really do like this exit. There's something about the shape of it as well as the tree. Other things we could see around Hyrule Field at this point are the trails, rocks, some trees, Hyrule Castle off at a distance once you crescent the hill. Off to the east of Kokiri Forest, where we're going to touch first, there are some trees, sort of like a really small forest, much like the Beta Lost Woods. This small area could have been used a lot better, I think. Maybe there could have been a house or a small village around here. This can also be said about the empty space right beside it. Also, the trees here are pretty different from the other ones. There's also these weird bushes here that I've never really noticed before. Looking back on Kokiri Forest, we can actually see the Lost Woods behind the environment. This is a really nice touch, I think, and shows the scope of the Lost Woods. I also do not doubt that the Lost Woods are much larger here than shown in the game. There are areas within this game that we don't see in Majora's Mask, for example, like the more wide and open Beta Lost Woods that we saw at the start of that game. Down the road, we can look at this empty area. We also see this strange looking building. As we get closer, we notice that it's also at a lower elevation than the rest of the field. Just looking at it, it also seems that you can't really go past this until later in the game. This isn't true, however, since there's a ladder here where we can get over these barriers. It's very strange that this thing is even here. One question I ask myself is, why is this here? There's no real point to this structure, I feel. Gameplay-wise, it may keep the player focused on the main goal at hand that Navi is begging you to do, but to other players, they may just ignore it altogether since of the gates. To be fair, there was a civil war in Hyrule just 10 years before this, so this is probably related to the fact that there were armies moving in and out of here possibly. Referencing Hyrule's Storia on the Hyrulean Civil War doesn't help much either as to what's happening here. There are no mention of the Zoras who have access to the lake behind this barrier. I'm not exactly sure why this is here. Most likely it's a barrier put here in place by the Kingdom of Hyrule to stop traffic to or from the lake without hassle. Moving up the field, we can find the area that begins Gerudo Valley. This area is also really cool and shows these stark differences between the Kingdom of Hyrule and the old ladies at the Gerudo Valley. We can make a few assumptions just by visiting this small area. Most likely it's a very arid and hot climate. There's also this really strange looking pillar or a stone obelisk here. This does seem to be a natural phenomenon since there's really no evidence of this being man-made. The shape is really weird too, and it seems to look the exact same on each side. From this area, we can also see there is a similar, almost mirrored environment in the Hyrule Field area. I also noticed that across all cliffs and ledges around the field, there are fences. There's also a lot of fences here that just don't line up at all or make much logical sense. And they don't really show what they're blocking off that well either. This fence also keeps going off from the cliffside, but there's another fence parallel to this one, which actually overlays the other one, so I'm not exactly sure why this fence is here either. Keeping in with the theme, with stuff that just doesn't make much sense, there's also this stone wall just jutting out of Lon Lon Ranch. This wall doesn't seem to serve really any purpose either. Maybe this was some foundation of an older Hyrule castle, or the remains of a fort during the Hyrule Civil War. There's a similar type of wall on the other end here, so possibly this was the foundations of a remaining structure of a fort based here 10 years prior that was destroyed in the Civil War. Yet again, we don't know much about this war at all, so these are very bold assumptions. We can also see some of these weird bushes here, as well as a few trees. Continuing up the road, we also can find some more poorly used areas. One area that I completely forgot about until investigating this for the video was this open space beside the castle. This also has the river from Zora's River flowing through it. This river eventually enters into a wall, which I assume will link up with the much larger and more powerful waterway, creating the river flowing through the Gerudo Valley and Lake Hylia. This small river isn't anywhere to be seen within Hyrule Castle Town, something that I think is interesting since we do see it entering the castle. I assume off-screen there are some water wheels or a filter to provide the people of Hyrule with drinking water. We do see a similar type of moat at Hyrule Castle. It also seems as if the water used in the fountains and other castle-type stuff exits from this small hole in the castle wall. This could be wastewater leaving the castle. I think that this moat is also very interesting. Chances are that this small river is unrelated to the main moat we see out in the field. It could link up with Lake Hylia River later down the way, but we just don't know. This water has to go somewhere or it'll flood. This water could also just be recirculated back into the castle. Heading back downstream to the area that sparked this discussion, there could have been a lot more done at this area. They really could have put anything down here, like a sawmill powered by the river, or like a super small settlement. Anything would have been better than nothing. Clearly, the people of Hyrule paid enough attention to this area, since the exit for the water is a very well-crafted stone passageway for the water. This also seems like the whole river was man-made as well. Since the Kingdom of Hyrule is pretty advanced, this is probably a canal dug for this waterway. The way the water bends is very intentional and it's full of right angles, and this doesn't really resemble natural rivers much at all. This could just be a technical limitation of the hardware, but this river is very straightforward and to the point. It does leave from Zora River, which enters Castle Town, and then leaves via waterfall to this other canal to what we can assume is Lake Hylia. There's also this area in Hyrule where the Zora River comes out of, and this is what goes into the castle, and through the moat, and through all the other areas that we talked about earlier. I think this area is really cool, and this is also where you see Link get off his horse on the title screen. This is a pretty nice area, and it's very cozy feeling. Continuing to circle around the area, there's also this part of the field that's always been interesting to me, and this is the misaligned fence. As you can see, it was clear that the trail was supposed to align with the opening in the fence, but this is not the case. Although some people may not give this part of the field much attention, there is kind of a drought of stuff going on here, so I'm pretty drawn towards it. Honestly, I think it's funny how this was just never caught by the time the game was released. Interestingly, this area was actually removed in the 3DS port of the game. Several weird oddities were removed as well, like the fence exiting from the far end of the cliff by the Gerudo Valley and Lake Hylia. This further shows that somewhat, a lot of the stuff here was overlooked or was a mistake, and they decided to fix this in the remake. As for some enemies, there are some you can find within Hyrule Field. In the child timeline, you're able to find Peahats and Stall Children. The Stall Children are pretty cool. If you walk off the trails at night, they'll rise out of the ground. If you actually kill enough of them, there will be a giant Stall Child. Funny enough, the developers did not put a limit on the size of the Stall Children. There's really no reason to put a limit here, since normally in-game you can only get about 1 or 2 big Stall Children instances to occur. But if you freeze time and keep killing Stall Children, you can spawn in Stall Children with exceptionally large sizes. This is always a bit of cool trivia about the game. Peahats will just fly around and send their minions after you. Nothing too crazy. They were also in Zelda 1, so that's pretty interesting. In the adult timeline, you can find a ton of Poes around the field. If you capture one, you can give it to the Poe Collector and he will give you points for it. But we'll talk about him later on when we're actually at the castle. Since the majority of the outside of Hyrule Field is now taken care of, I think it's now time we cover Lon Lon Ranch. Lon Lon Ranch is the section in the middle of the field. As we can see, this area is a ranch. You can also see this in the name. Lon Lon Ranch is the main area within Hyrule Field to say. It's on this kind of summit in the middle of the field, and it's a semi-important area of the game. You can also learn Epona's song here. I didn't know this, but you actually don't need Epona to beat the game, but you can get a bottle here and a piece of heart, and Epona as well, so it is pretty recommended. The people living on this ranch are Talon, Ingo, and Malon. Talon and Ingo were clearly Mario and Luigi, and Malon is also wearing a Bowser emblem. Within Lon Lon Ranch, we have a few various places. These are the ranch itself, the house, and the stable. In the ranch, we have a herd of horses, nothing too crazy. Off to the side, there's this big silo with a cow in it and a block-moving puzzle, just the highest form of puzzles in this game. In the stable, we have Ingo and a few cows. It's a pretty nice interior. In the house, we have Talon and some cuckoos. There is a minigame you can play here for a bottle. Upstairs, there is also a bedroom. In the adult timeline, it's almost the exact same. The only difference is that Ingo is in charge and there are some gates around the place. But after you get Epona, everything is pretty much the same. Lon Lon Ranch is pretty cool, however. Romani Ranch is much cooler and it's a much more fleshed out area. However, if Ocarina of Time disk drive actually happened, I expect Lon Lon Ranch would have turned out much like Romani Ranch. A little bit north of the ranch is Hyrule Castle. Hyrule Castle and its town is a pretty cool area. You can't explore Hyrule Castle like in Link to the Past, but you do get a pretty nice stealth segment later on. The town is open to the public during the day, and the drawbridge will close during the night. This is to keep the bad guys out and the good guys in, to say. You actually get to see this drawbridge in action, since by the time you leave Kokiri Forest, it will become nighttime. This also forces you to fight monsters in the field at night. I've often seen this as a critique against the game, because Hyrule Field is so big, we can't get there in time, it sucks. I forget exactly what video I'm referencing, but I'm sure you guys have seen this before, and you probably know what I'm talking about, and you probably heard it before elsewhere on the internet. But I feel like this actually works in favor for the game. It really forces the player to understand that there is a passage of time here, and it forces you to fight monsters, really, that's about it. And it's also to show off the drawbridge in action, which is also pretty cool. Before you reach the market, you're in this in-between area by the moat in the market. There is one place you can go here, and this is the little guard shack with a ton of pots. There is a garden here, and it's theorized that the guard becomes a Poe collector, since they're in the same spots, and the guard talks about wishing something awful will happen, and the Poe collector also keeps much of these same themes. Other theories as to who the Poe collector is, some say it's the kid in Kakariko, and we'll talk about him in a future episode. In the market, you can see how alive Hyrule really is. There's people all over the place, and there's a sizable number of places to visit. These are the bazaar, the potion shop, the bomb chew minigame, and at night there's two other places that are open, as well as some houses. The two places that are open at night are the bomb chew shop and the Lens of Truth minigame. The Lens of Truth minigame here involves you picking a chest that will either contain a key or a rupee. At the end, there's also a piece of heart. In each room, you have a 50-50 shot at moving on to the next one if you're not using the Lens of Truth. The two homes there are not really much at all. You can get a heart piece if you bring this one woman's dog home. The Temple of Time is also in this area. This place does seem to be neglected by the people of Hyrule, despite being very well maintained and massive. The area outside of it is also very, very cool looking. There's these little moats, and there's also 5 gossip stones outside here as well, which will tell you some more hints about the game, but we'll cover these gossip stones in the Gossip Stones segment. The Temple of Time is a really nice temple, and it looks a lot like a cathedral. This place also contains the Master Sword and the entrance to the Sacred Realm. Going into Hyrule Castle, this area seems like it'll be very full of life. Well, it is, but it also isn't at the same time. This is pretty hard to explain. For one, this area sets the feel of the castle really well. What I mean here is that it's kinda out of reach for the normal people of Hyrule. On the other hand, once you actually get up here, it's pretty underwhelming. To get into the castle, you need to go for this stealth segment, which isn't really a good stealth segment since the guards can't see you unless you're right up against them pretty much. There are some cool parts of the segment, like the rock wall or how you have to swim for the moat to get to the other entrance. It really does add to the I'm not really supposed to be here feeling. There is this one spot within the gate that I like. This could have been left completely inaccessible to the player, but the fact that it is open to the player is pretty cool. I also like how you have to use these vines to get up to the ridge to get into the castle. The other climbable object here that isn't a ladder is the rock wall, which makes the area feel much older in my opinion. There's also a fairy fountain here, and the fairy gives you Din's fire. This is an item that will release a flame all around you. To get into the castle, you have to crawl through this water spout, which will put you into the garden or courtyard area. This is another stealth segment, and once you get out of here, you're in the garden area where you meet Princess Zelda. This area is pretty nice and I enjoy it a lot. I do like the statues around here. They really add to the atmosphere really well in my opinion. Hyrule Castle is a pretty cool place and it's a shame you can't explore this place more. Some Easter eggs around here that you can find is in the garden area. If you look for the windows, you can see the Mario Bros. Roster of characters. And if you use your slingshot and shoot one of the arrows, a guard will actually come out and throw a bomb at you. So that's some pretty cool Easter eggs. That's really about it for this area, however. If we go back to the Temple of Time and pull the Master Sword from its pedestal, we're now an adult. Now once we leave the Sacred Realm, nothing really seems to be out of the ordinary. The temple is the exact same as we left it, and I think it's safe to assume here that nothing has greatly changed, or nothing has changed much at all. Once we leave the Temple of Time, however, we can already see how destroyed Hyrule is. The Temple of Time is standing pretty well, however. You'd think this place would be destroyed, but it's not. Death Mountain now has a massive ring of fire around it, and the sky is purple. Well, this is already a pretty telltale sign that the whole town is probably destroyed. This is pretty rough, clearly, and as we continue through the area, we can see that the market is completely destroyed, with redeads all over the place. This is sure an awful sight to see. The back alleys are also no longer accessible here either. And that's it. There's a destroyed castle town. We can also see Ganondorf's castle off in the distance where Hyrule Castle used to be. If we go up there, we see his castle floating over a giant pit of lava. Honestly, this is a little overdramatic in my opinion. A huge black castle probably would have been enough. I think that probably would have been a whole lot more intimidating than a castle floating over a pit of lava. This is kind of bordering on comical now. It's also pretty cool how this area retains much of the same environment from the child timeline. The ridge is still here, and the ruins of the gate is also here as well. There's also this giant skull here, which doesn't really look like a human skull or any other skull we've seen in the game. Maybe it's a moblin, I couldn't tell you. The fairy fountain is now pushed way back than where it was before. Maybe there was a second fairy fountain behind the old fairy fountain that got lost to time. I can't really say much about that. There's also a massive obelisk that can be picked up at the end of the game, so if you want that final upgrade, you better wait till the tail end of the game. The market is probably the most drastically changed place in the game. This also gives you a pretty good hint how the rest of the game is going to look and drastically change going on. Leaving the Hyrule Castle town, we can re-enter the little guard room, meeting the Poe Collector. Now, we talked about him earlier, and he has a Triforce on his wall, and he's also wearing a Triforce. This character is very mysterious, and is also the first person we meet outside of the Temple of Time. If you want to count the redeads as old people who have perished from Ganondorf's rule, then you can count them too, but personally I don't. They're dead. Leaving the castle, we can see that the drawbridge is completely destroyed, and there's a huge fog all around the castle. Once you keep walking, however, the fog would disappear, and there really is no real difference out in the field. Hyrule Field is much the same, besides the fact that there are Poes lurking around the field instead of stall children. The first 5 minutes of being an adult in this game really shows how well Ganondorf just completely obliterated Hyrule. this is about it for the environment and its changes in the game. There isn't really much more to talk about. Lon Lon, as I mentioned earlier, did change a little bit. The only real difference is that Ingo's in charge, which he will swiftly be taken care of once you go there. As for the gossip stones around the field, there are a lot, and they give us a lot of lore elements about the game as well. This is what the gossip stones will say outside of the Temple of Time. They say that Malon set the original record in the obstacle course of Lon Lon Ranch. They say that Malon of Lon Lon Ranch hopes a knight in shining armor will come and sweep her off her feet one day. They say that it is against the rules to use glasses at the treasure chest shop in Hyrule Castle Town Market. They say that Gerudos sometimes come to Hyrule Castle to look for boyfriends. These are the ones by Hyrule Castle. They say that, contrary to her elegant image, Princess Zelda of Hyrule is in fact a tomboy. They say that you may find something new in dungeons that you have already finished. And this one is in Hyrule Field within a secret grotto. They say that there's a switch that you can activate only by using the spin attack. Since everything we've talked about so far covers probably about 90% of what goes on in Hyrule Field, and in an area I'm now calling Greater Hyrule, or the Heart of Hyrule, it's probably going to be the title of this video, I think it's very appropriate now that we talked about the beta elements. I think that we can now cover beta screenshots of the field. We have two screenshots that show different colors of grass. The grass here is much deeper in color, and it looks to be a little more empty. This other screenshot is in Lake Hylia, but I think it's also important to show since it shows the deeper grass color. Some later screenshots show a much closer to being finished Hyrule Field. There's some of these massive fences. Now, don't be alarmed. I do know that in some beta screenshots and renders we have of the game, when there are fences blocking off empty areas, this typically means that there's something planned for that area. Now, some may say, many of these fences are still there. There's also a good bit of screenshots showing a beta Lon Lon Ranch. Many of these screenshots show the place being much more open. One of these images resembles Ramadi Ranch as well. Most of the screenshots are just very wide open. It feels like a more realistic farm. The images for the castle town are also very interesting looking. In the initial stages of development, they show a much larger Hyrule Castle, much better than what we got in the final game. Some later images we have are also pretty cool. These show minor differences, even to some major differences. Some of these major differences are the old Happy Mask shop, And another major difference I feel is the old render of the Temple of Time. This also looks like you could walk like behind a temple, and I really do like this temple render, and it's really interesting looking. Some minor differences we can find is that in some of the back alleyways there's lampposts, and that's really about it for that. Lastly, we have images of the castle courtyard. These are mostly the exact same as the final. They do look pretty cool, however. Alright everyone, that is about it for this video. I hope you enjoyed this, and make sure to join us in 2 weeks for the Death Mountain video. If you like this, make sure to like, subscribe, share, comment, whatever you can do to kind of boost this video in the algorithm. I do work hard on these, and I'd like for this to be seen by a lot of people. So thank you very much. Thank you for watching.